Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Motor City Mad Mouth Show here on No Filter Network. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth. Please be joined by George Icorn of the Detroit Monitor. George, welcome to the big show.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Looking forward to it.
Well, tonight we'll be talking Detroit sports. Obviously, a lot of things going on in a market that has four major ones, let alone the fact that the Michigan Wolverines will be starting pretty soon as well. Well, you know what, George? We're going to start here with baseball season. So I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Promising season for the Detroit Tigers turned into what?
Uh, so-so season. And I say that because coming out of Lakeland, they had a very good spring. Uh, Almost everybody was healthy. It was a good situation. They got out of the gate really nice against the White Sox, and everybody had high expectations. But it's turning into a middle of the road so season. They probably won't even finish 500, Scott. I mean, they play around with trying to get back to 500, but that being said, it's not been what it was expected to be. No.
Well, when you break down the reality of the year, you've had Spencer Torkelson's troubles at the plate, and everybody expected a big year out of Spence. Harry Carpenter was out for a fair amount of the season due to an injury, and you saw what happened the other night when he clubbed two home runs in that 15-1 win over Seattle. Kenta Maeda, who they brought in from the Twins, who they thought for sure would be a frontline pitcher, obviously hasn't come to fruition. And then you have Casey Mize, who's been hurt. So, you start off with those four guys, and where do you go? I mean, why? When I was there with the Marlins, I'm thinking the Tigers won the first game and they were shut out for the final two. They can't find any offense to save themselves.
They sure can. Like you said, it's like feast or famine. They scored 15 runs in game one against Seattle at home. Um, I tell you what, first of all, you started with the right one, Torkelson. I mean, this guy, 30 home runs last year. He really had a wonderful finish the second half of the season and really had everybody saying, wow, man, this kid's for real. Well, we all know what happened. I mean, he just fell on his face. I don't know what's going on. I hope it's not a mental thing, but he's still down in Toledo at AAA. They have not recalled him yet. He has been doing better lately. Uh, and Ken Maeda, I mean, he has not been good, but he's in the bullpen now, as you know. He's suffered a way over not even average ERA. My God, he's in the fives, and that hurt a lot. And then you got a guy like Flaherty in another deal, and then you dealt him at the trading deadline to try to leverage some young players, some restock, and help your minor league and your major league impending season next year. But there's just a lot of things that have gone wrong. Yeah, injuries has been one of them too. But Torkelson, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect Maeda to be that bad either.
Well, with John Flaherty, you got him as a 1 year rental anyway. So if you can amass any kind of prospects out of a guy that you got literally for free, then I don't know if I have as much of a problem with that. I really don't. I understand Carson Kelly, they traded him, and they brought up the young catcher from the minor leagues who was ready to go. So I don't really feel that was a bad move. And as far as Andrew Chafin is concerned, was he that big of a deal in the bullpen? You would know better because obviously you're in
Yeah.
the area.
Yeah,
You
well,
tell me.
left-handed relievers, of course, are prime guys. You got to have one or two good ones in the bullpen, and he had a 3 point something ERA. I mean, he did very well. I thought, not unhittable, but I mean, he's had a pretty good year, Chafin. But you got to remember, they gave up on him once before, and then they brought him back a few years later, meaning this year now. So I mean, he's a guy that moves around as teams need, in the playoff chase, the wild card chase, whatever. They need guys like that. And you're right, Flaherty was, a 1 year thing. I wish they were at a point, the Tigers, where they didn't have to do that every trade deadline is deal guys. But when contracts are up, that's the name of the game, and they in the MLB now.
What have you heard about AJ Hinch? Obviously, he was telling the front office, you better not sell. Therefore, they kept Derek Stubble, and a lot of the other core players, but they didn't improve the team other than the fact that if you want to say they ended up getting prospects. So, what do you think the mindset is as far as AJ Hinch is concerned?
Well, I think that they're still very much high on him. I mean, Chris Ellich. doesn't really talk to the media at all. The owner and Scott Harris has been more visible than he had been last year. I think they're pleased with him. I mean, as far as the experience goes, and he's got a very deep uh, coaching staff. They added guys to it this year. They got assistants to the hitting instructor, assistants to the pitching coach, and all this stuff. AJ, he handles it. He handles the press marvelously, really. I mean, he's not accessible all the time, but when he does talk after the games, he doesn't go around and blast his players, doesn't talk behind their back or anything like that. So I think he's got the support of the locker room, let's say. But the fact is they still haven't been winning. Now, last year he got a little bit of a mulligan because they did finish good in the second half of last year. This year it's not going to be that way. It looks like unless something really turns around fast. I still think he's a good manager for this team, but there's more and more people chattering about should he be here or not. Those are just media. I mean, talk show guys that want to create a stir.
So at what point does AJ Hinch evaluate the situation? Listen, it's been 3 years, been a good soldier here. I was hoping to make a bigger impact in year three. Does he give it one more year? Or do you think he's just going to say, I've had enough? I don't think that we've really made the progress that we have made. Obviously, you couldn't control the fact that Torkelson regressed because Don Mattingly once told me it's one thing to hit well at AAA, but when you get to the major leagues, it's a different animal. Don Mattingly used to tell me this all the time. Torkelson last year did well. I mean, everybody expected a lot out of him and Carpenter. Carpenter, I still think you can salvage him. Torkelson, you have to wonder where to draw the line. But what about AJ Hinch? Would you say that maybe year four is it if he doesn't see any major significant changes during the offseason?
I would agree with you, Scott. I think he's in for next year. I would be shocked if he walked or wanted to get out. But next year, yeah, that's going to be a crucial one. They've got to show mark progress and mark improvement. And I hope he's the kind of guy that walks into Scott Harris's office and tells him, hey, you need to get me a proven third baseman, or you need to get me another starter. We're strapped right now. I mean, I think he has enough confidence in himself, obviously, to say that to a president or a general manager of the team. But boy, oh boy, I mean, they've got to spend a little bit of money this offseason. They've got some holes. They don't have everybody ready yet from the minors to fill these gaps right now, but they are certainly on a good trajectory. Let's put it that way. They are ranked, as you know, and many of your listeners probably know, the Tigers are ranked in the top 10. Baseball minor league system. So I don't think AJ is ready to walk away from that situation. No.
Well, when I left the Marlins series, I know it was relatively earlier in the year, but now we're seeing it as we get to the dog days of summer. But the Tigers don't have anybody down the middle of that order that even scares me at all, let alone the opposition.
I know. Zach McKinstry, you look at these averages now. Now Rogers is again hot and cold, the catcher. He gets a couple grand slams this year, two home runs the other night in the same game. And man, oh man, but he can't hit consistently. He's under 200 or hovering around 200. Baez has been a joke, as we all know, at shortstop. I mean, that's just been a total disaster. Guy can't even hit 200. And you're right. That's a good way to put it, Scott. Nobody scares you when you look at the middle and the back end of that lineup. It's sad. I mean, these guys they strike out too much and they do not hit for average.
All right, today's Motor City Mad Mouse show has two authors. One of them is myself. Lessons from the Microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders can be obtained by Amazon, Kindle, and Barnes and Noble. And George, why don't you pull up your book real quickly as well?
Yeah, mine is called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. When Scott and I started out way back in the day, the Sports Exchange, we met all kinds of guys. And so this book is more of a history lesson of Detroit sports broadcasting, and you can get it at Amazon.com. And like I said, Scott's in it. I'm the author, and it's a great, great keepsake.
And this book is more like a textbook slash. If you don't know anything about the media, you'll get a really good education about how it was, how it is. and all the people that made it what it was. But this is like a textbook. If you don't know anything about today's podcast, old school media versus new school media, this is a book that will enable you to go out there and educate yourself on both ends of the equation. All right,
Oh,
now as we move on to the Detroit Red Wings, how would you rate their offseason, George?
I think it was pretty good. I think they've done some things that I liked, especially Vladimir Tereshchenko was one of the great pickups. They added some more depth on the blue line, and then obviously picked up another goalie. But the problem is they also had to give up some of the guys that they had hoped to keep, and those are guys that could not fit under the salary cap. I mean, just like every hockey team, there's a salary cap issue. So but I would give Steve Eisman probably a B, maybe a B minus for this offseason, Scott.
Well, the goaltending thing, at what point, though, do you think Sebastian Cossa will be ready? I know that he's been in the system for a couple of years. I know he's had a lot of success in juniors, let alone the fact in the minor leagues. And this guy's your goaltender of the future. So do you think he's could get a call up this year or definitely next year?
Think he'll get a call up this year. I think they're going to go with the veteran netminders this year. But I do agree with you on one thing. That cannot continue. They've got to get this young goalie developed. And there's no question about it. You and I have seen it over the years. I mean, we saw Chris Osgood, we saw Jimmy Howard, and how they developed them. But this organization has not developed a good quality goaltender in way too long a time. They're always trying to trade and pick up guys to stopgap it. But no, I'm high on Sebastian. I look forward to the day when he's a regular on the team to cover him because I think he's got a lot of great skills.
Well, the Red Wings usually go to Florida to get a player or two every year. James Reimer and Alex Lyon last year. This year, who do they go? They get Tarasenko. So we'll see who the next Panther will be next offseason for sure. But, as we continue with the Red Wings, okay, it's a couple names worth mentioning. We talked about Tarasenko. Well, obviously, gets to play for an original 16. And they also were able to re sign Patrick Kane. But so those are, at least you were able to retain Kane. And Tarasenko, I think, will be a fine addition. But now let's talk about the coach, Derek Lalone. Okay. I guess they call him Newsy Lalone. I don't get into all
Yeah,
those nicknames.
yeah.
But now you have an important year here, okay, with Lalone. At what point or another does he have to get in the playoffs, or will he find himself looking for employment elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very hot question in Detroit right now. You nailed that one, man. He's got some detractors around, and I don't see it. I'm sorry. From what my vantage point, I still think he's done a really good job. He's developed some of the young talent, Mort Snyder and Lucas Raymond, and I think that Lalonde is still, yeah. I would say here. Let me put it to you this way. I would say more than Iserman, the coach is on the line to make the playoffs this year. I don't see them firing Iserman. I do not see them going all out to keep Newsy if, in fact, Detroit misses again for a ninth consecutive year. They're at 8 now that they've missed the playoffs. I think it is an important year, and I agree with you. And I think the fact that you kept Patrick Kane again sends the signal that we're serious. We definitely need to make the playoffs this year.
Well, it's amazing how you segue to where I'm going because I've lived with this down in Florida as well. A guy by the name of Joel Quinville has been reinstated by the league, and we all know that he coached for the Windsor Spitfires, and I think he'd be aching to get that Red Wings opportunity if it came along. Whether the Red Wings would go that route or not, I think Joel Quinville, should they move on from Malone, would be an ideal candidate to replace him. You have a veteran, he's a Stanley Cup winner. Stan Bowman recently got hired by the Edmonton Oilers. So I think you only make one call. It's to Joel Quinville. You think that could be the Steve Eiserman is not going anywhere. He just isn't.
No, he's not exactly. I've always admired Quinville. I have always admired his work, his working with players. He's a good defensive minded coach, and I tell you what, I mean, it's an unfortunate situation he was involved in, but yeah, like you said, the reinstatement. Bowman's back in the league now with Edmonton. They're succeeding, ironically, Kenny Holland. And Quinville, yeah, if he's available, he's another one. Now, Gerard Gallant was mentioned a lot too, back before he signed his last contract as a possibility, the former Red Wing as coach. But yeah, I think Stevie, if he's smart, he's got some names in mind in the back of his head if things do happen to go south with Lalone.
Well, they had to go south with Gerard Gallant too, because he's like a two or
Yeah,
3 year fix, and I view him as like the Billy Martin of hockey coaches, so to speak, because he's in there and gets you turned around quickly, and all of a sudden he's gone.
yeah.
Whereas Joel Quinville, he learned his lesson. Otherwise, why do you think Gary Bettman reinstated him? They obviously did the right things in order to get back in the league. And I don't know about you, but I definitely believe in second chances.
Oh, most definitely. And I've always admired him. I mean, Detroit had classic battles with his teams, and he's a very smart coach. And I mean, we had in Detroit, we were blessed to have Scotty Bowman, and then Mike Babcock. Well, Dave Lewis for a short time as head coach. But the fact of the matter is that yeah, Quinville is one of the best minds out there. That's not working right now. Of course, Babcock would be up there too, but he's got some baggage that I think the teams aren't ready to bring him back.
Well, yeah, when that baggage is that you're going out there and looking at your team's cell phone photos, I think
Yeah.
that's more than baggage. Job in Columbus was there for the taking. I think Babcock could have done a good job if he had learned a little bit from his past transgressions. And, that was a good situation that he squandered badly for sure.
Oh yeah, I agree. I
All right,
agree.
so let's stay in the same arena, Little Caesars Arena, but that team called the Detroit Pistons, they've had a complete overhaul. Out is Monty Williams, in is JB Bickerstaff, out is Troy Weaver, in is Trajan Langdon. Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. were brought in during the offseason. Luke Walton is the assistant coach. How do you like the direction that the Pistons are going in?
I do like it because I have a high admiration for Langdon. I've always liked Bickerstaff. I mean, I liked it when his father was a darn good coach, and he is also. And you can say what you want about bringing guys like Hardaway in and Tobias, but I mean, they need a veteran presence. These kids on the team, these young players, are not. Uh, Obviously, they proved it last year. They're just not ready to step it up unless they're surrounded by some veterans, which is the route they hope to be taking, and it'll be up to Bickerstaff to figure out that lineup and how he's going to, bring guys in off the bench and what kind of defenses he's going to throw out there. I mean, the Pistons have nowhere else to go, Scott, but up. I mean, that was proven by last year's fiasco and the horrible losing streak, and then the horrible, and then and then of course they couldn't get a first or even a second or even a third pick because of that draft lottery, even though they had the worst record in the NBA. But the trajectory, I feel, got a little better. But it's going to be a rebuild again. I mean, they're trying to rebuild this thing. It's been way too long since they were good.
Well, a 28 game losing streak doesn't help the coach at all, and
Yeah.
let alone the fact that they only won 14 games, and prior to that, the worst they had won 16, and even Dwayne Casey did a lot with nothing when he managed to stay in there with at least 20. And I'm glad that he stayed in the building too, because he had a chance to become an assistant coach with the Lakers, but Dwayne stayed in Detroit to stay the course. So JB Bickerstaff leads the Cavaliers to a couple of playoff appearances, and obviously he's let go. So what do you think that JB Bickerstaff will bring to the Detroit Pistons?
Well, I think one of the things obviously he has to bring is to preach defense. I mean, they just had given up so many uncontested baskets last year and uncontested open shots. I mean, drill he must drill into that team, into those young players especially, the importance of defense. And it's in a situation where not only you got to score in this league, but boy, if you can defend, you have a really good chance of success in the NBA because we know how wide open this offense has become, and throwing bombs up there. Most of the players do nowadays. But boy, if you can get some people that aren't afraid to go into the basket, like the good old days, my God, with Mahorn and Lambier and James Edwards. I mean, we were spoiled with the defense those guys played. But I tell you what, I think Bickerstaff does have a better pedigree. And Monty Williams, I mean, that was just a fiasco. All that money they gave him, and he just lost that team this past year. He really did.
Well, Kate Cunningham had a belief in this team, because if he didn't have a belief in this team, he wouldn't have signed that big, lofty extension for sure. And with Monty Williams, give me his businessman or agent all day long, because he's got money coming, I think, from Phoenix and Detroit. So I don't think
Yeah,
Ronnie ain't going to have to work for a little while. And you have Jaden Ivey and you have some Oscar Thompson, I believe, and
yeah.
Jalen Duran. So I think they've got a good young core over with the Pistons. They just need the right coach to meld it and bring. And it sounds like they have a pretty good coaching staff. And Luke Walton just came over as well. So I know Luke's always been a pretty good coach as well.
Oh gosh, yeah, I admire Luke Walton. I think he's done a great job in the NBA. But you're right. I mean, Kate Cunningham is the guy to build around, and they are sold on him, and I'm sold on him too. I mean, he's the type of player that you can really build around. But they've got to get the supporting cast, and they got some of the pieces. Let's hope, but we'll see what happens.
All right, final team. We're going to talk about Detroit Lions, 12-5, won a couple playoff games with Jared Goff as a quarterback. I heard Matthew Stafford say he wasn't rooting for any team, but I'll tell you what, that's the best crowd he's ever heard in terms of in terms of the fact that he knows that the Detroit fans are passionate. So, first of all, did you have a chance to go to that playoff game against the Rams?
No, that is one that I was not able to go because of a family situation, but I did go to the Tampa Bay game, and for the Lions to win just one playoff game, let alone two, and then go to the NFC title game was just unbelievable. Yeah, Stafford got the kind of treatment. I'm sure he and Kelly, his wife, didn't expect that many boos, but he is the opposition. You want to beat him, you want to win. If you're a Detroit fan, of course you're going to boo, and people that take that kind of stuff seriously, and I don't think Matthew does. He wasn't totally caught off guard by that kind of stuff, but let's face it. I mean, they did not do anything under him. Two or three playoff losses. That was it. I mean, they didn't win a playoff game with him as quarterback, but he still was one of the greatest Lions players of all time. No question about that.
Well, when you have a entire state chanting Jared Goff, I don't think that didn't motivate Goff to want to re-sign an extension, knowing I've never been treated like this before. A whole state chanting my name. I mean, and let alone the fact that now he'll go down as a trivia question as the latest Lion to let alone win one but two playoff games, and one of those playoff games that they won against Tampa, they avenged a previous loss when they lost in Tampa many years ago as well. I think Scott Mitchell was the quarterback
Oh
then,
yeah, yeah.
but they won two and they weren't that far off until they had that bad third quarter against the 49ers. The Lions could have been facing the Kansas City Chiefs, another story. So what type of year do you think Jared Goff is going to have?
Well, I think he will have another good year, outstanding year. I mean, you won't find him in the top five quarterbacks according to the experts, but he's certainly in the top 10. He's in the next five. I don't really care about those rankings. I think the fans don't care about that either. He is a guy that's very focused. He got married in the offseason. The old term about settling down a little bit, and he gets along so well with his teammates, the camaraderie and the respect that all of them have for him and vice versa, I think is phenomenal. And it's interesting that you brought that up about the chanting. I mean, my goodness, you're at the NFL draft on opening night and the fans out there are doing their Jared Goff, or you're at a Red Wing game one night and they start with the Jared Goff chanting. The fans have taken to him. The team has surrounded him with, the club has surrounded him with good talent, St. Brown and Laporta, and they got a lot of good people out there on that team, offensive weapons, and he's the leader of it. He's got to be take charge guy once again this year.
Okay, well, we talk about the fact that you got Goff, but what about Jamison Williams? Is this the year that he goes ahead and finally has that breakout year?
I think it has to be Scott. I mean, Jamison was a high draft pick by Detroit, and there's no question about it. He's got the talent. He's got raw talent. He's got great arm, great hands, and I really think that if he can blossom, oh my goodness, then they can't double and triple team other guys that they want to do that with. The defenses are going to have a tough time going up against successful Jamison Williams. I think that he will. I the signs that I've seen in training camp and the reports coming out of Allen Park, I do believe that he is on that kind of trajectory for improving this year, and he's got to step it up. Obviously, he's got to step it up. It's on him.
All right, now obviously we know Jared Goff has been pretty healthy, but You've got Hendon Hooker as your backup. Thankfully, all he did was sustain a mild concussion. But what were your thoughts about what you saw with Hendon Hooker in his first NFL action last week?
He's starting off at a disadvantage only because he hasn't had the number of practices that obviously other backup quarterbacks have had over the years. And last year pretty much was not a waste. He was watching and observing and doing what he could in practice, but obviously he was never dressed for being the backup. That being said, I think he showed some good stuff in the game against the Giants last week, the loss. But I do believe that he has to definitely learn fast. He has to pick up. He has to pick up the reads. He has to pick up a lot real fast. And he's a good runner, as we saw. But slide, slide. Don't go and try to get those extra yards because you get your bell rung and you get your concussions. You don't want that.
Okay, so Aiden Hutchinson.
Well, all pro guy. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy came out of the Michigan football factory, if you will, and yeah, following in his dad's footsteps. His dad, of course, was successful at both U of M and in the NFL. I have high hopes for him. He wants to improve this year upon last year. There were games when he was not quite as effective. I mean, there were times when you don't get a quarterback sack every game. Nobody gets that. I mean, that
Right.
would be next to impossible. But the fact of the matter is, he can't have games that he's like insignificant or out of place or can't keep up with the offense that he's lining up against. That being said, he's the kind of guy that always wants to get better, and I believe that, and I think that's his goal this year: more sacks, more pressure from him, and having more guys on the line to help him out too. He can't do it all.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this one note. We have Sports Exchange at the top of the hour, but the Lions addressed their kicking situation and they stayed in the building to do it. Dan Campbell saw Jake Bates hit him long and he hit him deep. So, what are your expectations about Jake Bates?
Well, again, I hope he's the right answer. The only question I've got is he does not have the NFL experience, and that's a biggie. Now, he was in the UFL, and he did a really good job, as you alluded to, for the Michigan Panthers, who, like you said, also played at Ford Field. But those long kicks, he's got to not only make long kicks, but he's got to get real comfortable in that 40 to 50 range as well. You can ill afford to have a kicker missing field goals and extra points for that matter. So I think that he seems to be a good fit so far, but I still think that they should have had more competition for that. Of course, Badgley was hurt, so that he was ruled out. So it's too bad he's ruled out for the whole season. So I do think that the kicking game is still a little bit of a question mark, Scott, only because I'd rather see this guy challenged every day of training camp. And but Bates does have some good skills.
Well, he's kicking indoors too. So, the Lions finished 12-5 during the regular season. Give me your prediction about where they should be in 2024.
Well, I tell you what, based on what I've seen, there's no reason why this team can't be 13-4. They've got a schedule that's tough. Of course, you're going to have a tough schedule. A lot of rematches from last year. L.A. Rams opening night, Sunday night football. You got Tampa Bay coming back in. Seattle's been their nemesis. They're back in. You got an improved Green Bay team, an improved Chicago Bears team in the division. But I'm telling you, this team is stacked, and I would be 12-5 or 13-4 is what I'm looking at from the Lions this year. I can't believe I'm saying that, but they are that talented.
Well, I mean, you're closer to the area than I am. I think the one reason why they have a chance to even get to those numbers is they were able to retain their offensive coordinator. What's the name? Ben Johnson.
Yes, yes. Ben
It's not.
Johnson again turned down a head coaching job. Yeah,
Well, if you can retain your best asset, that's your offensive coordinator, let alone what the continuity he's had with Jared Goff, it definitely does give you a puncher's chance. So once again, the Motor
yeah.
City Madmouth Show tonight. We're talking Detroit sports. My name is Scott Morgan about the Motor City Madmouth and George Eichhorn from the Detroit Monitor. Once again, we are both promoting books, lessons from the microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. yours truly. And we're going to be working on a second one later on in the year with a lot of the updates that we'll have going through the end of the year to try to get me a sequel. You know, sometimes, George, when you have a book like this, you can't get it all in on the first shot. But I can guarantee when I scoop it up and go ahead and get it up on the second, we'll definitely be able to go ahead
Oh
and
yeah.
finish the job. And I have other ideas and things I want to get done as well. But priority number one, finish the second half. So, meanwhile, on behalf of George Icorn, my name is Scott Morgan off the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for talking Detroit sports, everybody, from the Motor City Madmouth Show. And we will catch you the next time here on the No Filter Network. Good night, everybody.